I'm 2 hours off shift and I'm sitting in my truck in the parking lot instead of driving home, because Rosa asked me a question I can't stop turning over. "You've been listening to a voice on the radio for a year," she said, peeling an orange in the break room like it was nothing. "What are you going to do when it turns into a face?" I didn't have an answer then. I'm not sure I have one now. But I'll tell it to you the way it happened, because maybe you've had a version of this too. The person you know better than people you've actually touched. His name is Elliott. I learned that in month 3, off a coworker, not off him. Before that, he was just Rescue 9's favorite dispatcher, the one who never sounded rushed even when the call was bad, the one who'd slip in some small kindness after the coordinates. "Watch the ice on that ramp, keep your gloves dry, that dog's friendly, don't let his bark fool you." Little things you don't have to say. He said them anyway. I'm Priya Chandran, 26, paramedic out of Station 9 for going on 4 years. You'd think 4 years of running toward other people's worst nights would toughen a person against something as small as a voice through a headset. It didn't. If anything, it made me more susceptible, because I know exactly how rare it is to hear calm that isn't performed. Real calm, the kind that comes from someone who's already thought 2 steps past the crisis and is walking you there without making you feel small for not seeing it yourself. The first time I really noticed him was a bad one. A car off the county road in February, black ice, a family of 4. He talked me through the last quarter mile in a voice so level I matched my breathing to it without meaning to. When we got the kids stable, he came back on, just for a second, off protocol probably. "Nice work, 9. Go eat something when you're done." That was it. I sat in the rig afterward and felt my hands stop shaking, and some small, ridiculous part of me thought, I want to know what he looks like when he says things like that. Rosa says I built a person out of 11-second radio bursts and fell for the person I built, not the actual man. She's not wrong to worry about that. I've worried about it myself, 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, asking whether I was in love with a voice or a set of good coincidences. Good aim, good timing, a stranger who happened to be decent at his job during the worst nights of other people's lives. But here's the thing that kept me from letting it go. And maybe you'll feel this in your own chest if you think back on someone who was kind to you when nobody was checking whether they had to be. Elliott never sounded like that with everyone. I asked around, careful, not wanting to make it a thing. Marcus said dispatch was efficient with him, nothing more. Tonio said Elliott barely spoke to him past the call numbers. It was just me who got the extra sentence, the little unnecessary softness dropped into the middle of an emergency. Maybe that's arrogant of me to believe. Maybe every medic on that channel thinks the same thing about themselves. I don't know. I only know what I heard, night after night, and I started arranging my breaks around when I thought his shift might overlap with mine, which is a pathetic thing to admit, and I'm admitting it anyway. We met on a Tuesday that wasn't supposed to matter. Dispatch called an all-hands for a policy briefing, the kind of meeting where they make everybody who's never in the same room at the same time sit together in folding chairs and pretend to care about a new form. I walked in late, coffee in hand, radio still clipped to my belt out of habit, and a guy near the back lifted 2 fingers off his knee in a small wave, like he already knew me. "Priya Chandran," he said, before I'd even sat down. "You always request the loud channel." "How do you know my name?" I said, and he smiled like the question answered itself. "I've been reading your unit's coordinates back to you for a year. I know your name, your badge number, and that you take a full 90 seconds longer than protocol to double-check an address before you roll, which used to worry me until I realized you're always right." I sat down across from him because my legs made the decision before I did. Up close, his voice sounded exactly the same, which surprised me. You expect radio compression to lie about a person, to flatten or sharpen something, but his was just his, unhurried, a little rough at the edges like he hadn't slept enough, same as the version that had walked me through a dozen bad nights. "You know," I said, "you say a lot of things over an open channel you probably shouldn't." "I say the things I think you need to hear," he said. "There's a difference." I want to tell you this turned into something easy right away. The 2 of us finally matching a voice to a face and falling into step like it was always going to happen. It didn't. There was a stretch of weeks where we were awkward with each other in a way we'd never been on the radio, because the radio had rules. Coordinates, hazards, a little kindness at the end. And standing in a hallway with no call to hide behind, neither of us knew what to say. He'd nod at me by the coffee machine. I'd find something urgent to do with my hands. It was almost funny how much easier it had been to be close to him through a headset than 3 feet away in daylight. What changed it was a bad call in June, one I don't want to describe in detail because some nights you carry home and don't put back down easy. I came off shift, wrecked, sat in the stairwell instead of going to my car and my radio. Off duty, still clipped to me out of habit, caught the tail end of dispatch chatter. His voice, calm, walking the next unit through the same intersection where I'd just lost 20 minutes I'll never get back in my head. And I realized, sitting there, that the calm I'd fallen for wasn't a performance for me specifically. It was just who he was, offered freely to whoever needed it that night, and somehow that made it mean more, not less. Loving someone for a kindness that was never really yours alone. I think that's its own kind of grown-up love, if you let it be. He found me on that stairwell 20 minutes later. Didn't ask what happened. Just sat down on the step below mine and said, "You don't have to talk. I'll just sit here till you're ready to go home." "You always know exactly what to say," I told him, half accusing. "No," he said. "I know what not to say. Different skill." I married that thought later, alone, turning it over. A whole career built on knowing when to hold his tongue, and yet he'd never once held it with me. Not really. Not when a soft word could steady somebody's hands 3 counties away. Maybe you've loved someone for their restraint before their generosity, and understood only afterward they're the same muscle. We took it slow after that, the kind of slow 2 people choose when they already know too much about each other's worst nights to rush the good ones. Dinner after a shift that ran long. A drive with the radio off for once, both of us a little unsettled by the silence, laughing about it. I found out he'd requested to work my unit's channel on purpose, months back, after a supervisor mentioned a paramedic who double-checked every address like her life depended on getting it right the first time. He liked that about me before he liked anything else, he said. The carefulness. Everyone else on that channel just wanted the coordinates and gone. I still think about Rosa's orange, and her question, sitting there in the parking lot before any of this had a happy shape yet. Did I fall for a voice? Or for the man who happened to own it? I've decided the question doesn't split as clean as she wanted it to. A voice is a person, distilled down to the one thing they can't fake for a year straight. Patience, or the lack of it, kindness offered when nobody's checking. I got the truest part of him first and the rest of him after, which might be backward from how these things usually go, but I'm not convinced backward is worse. 2 nights ago I took a call that ran long and rough, and when it was over his voice came through, quieter than protocol required. "Nice work, 9. Go eat something when you're done." Same words as that February night, over a year old now. Except this time I know exactly whose face is on the other end of them. And I drove to the station instead of home, because he was waiting there with 2 sandwiches, and no idea yet that I'd remembered the exact sentence, word for word, since the very first time he ever said it to a stranger on the radio who was falling for him without knowing his name.